We are prosecuting people who are involved in people smuggling.
There is no other reason to be given why you have not gone to hell since you have sat here. O sinner, consider the fearful danger you are in. You hang by a slender thread with the flames of divine wrath flashing about it, ready every moment to singe it and burn it asunder, and you have no interest in any mediator and nothing to lay hold of save yourself. Nothing to keep off the flames of wrath, nothing of your own, nothing that you have ever done, nothing that you can do to induce God to spare you one moment.
Which I know very well, so I've lived in London most of my grown-up life.
And I think he just continues to incite hatred and prejudice, and I think he should apologise.
This is a journey into a lunatic asylum.
To add to our load the bitter quarrels with which the extreme socialists are eager to convulse and exploit these critical years.
Let's hear the latest forecast on the basis of that, Peter.
Right, David, let's build up the forecast on the map. Here we go. The Conservatives, 351, 42. Look at them pile up there. 42 down on what they were before. The Labour Party, 249, up 40. The Alliance, 26, down 1. And the others, 24 plus 3. Let's just split the Alliance in two and see what we're forecasting currently the Liberals and the SDP will take. 18 seats, the Liberals, we say, down 1. The SDP continuing with the 8 they had in the old Parliament. The others, 24, up 3. We're forecasting the Scottish National Party wins in Scotland. Now,
but Soros was only one key player in the game. The United Nations, as early as 2015, had situated way stations along many sub-Saharan and Middle Eastern routes where the early exodus of migrants was becoming noticeable. These were manned by blue helmets, supplying protection, food, water, and sometimes even shelter under the guise of refugee centers in so-called demilitarized microzones. It must be noted here that many ISIS fighters also used these as transit junctions between Europe and the various theaters of war in the Middle East.
Dina is a Muslim. It's crazy that they sent a drone over here to ruin our lives. She does have some credits. You may know her from crashing her truck into people in Manhattan last week.
Holy shit.
I can well imagine that if they were, for example, Germans or Russians who were going to be occupying 2/5 or a half of Birmingham at the beginning of the next century, a considerable proportion. In the case of Birmingham, it will be at least 2/5 will be occupied by the immigrants and their descendants by the early years of the next century.
This descendants?
Yes, indeed.
Yes, but they will.
Those descendants will still be thoroughly separate, for the most part, from the rest of the population because of the numbers. If the numbers were small, then of course, like any very small minority, they would filter into the population.
Our country and our parliament have demonstrated the ability to evolve, adapt, integrate good people who share our values and aspirations. And we must also demonstrate that we reject beliefs and practices that run counter to our values and those that seek to undermine democracy, freedom of speech and the rule of law. But British history is long.
It was revealed that an entire police force in the city of Leeds had picked David Olawale for the most terrible persecution. They picked him up at night, they beat him, they urinated on him. Finally, they killed him, and they threw his body in the River Aire.
This organization expresses solidarity because we recognize this is a class struggle, and we recognize the class we come from, the oppressed people, has no color.
So why, when a Jamaican or a West Indian is picked up, why should he be beaten in the police station? Why should he be beaten? Answer! We ask one question. Ladies and gentlemen, we all know we get ourselves in a few difficulties times, a bit of problem with the law. If we do something, we've been picked up at the police station, charged, but why should we be beaten up?
To give style to one's character, a great and rare art. It is practiced by those who survey all the strengths and weaknesses of their nature and then fit them into an artistic plan, until every one of them appears as art and reason, and even weaknesses delight the eye.
These may be inequalities, but these aren't evidence of discrimination. This doesn't change when characteristics are used to define groups. As any scientist should know, correlation isn't causation.
To succeed in this approach, according to Nietzsche, we should sculpt our character under the constraint of a single taste, selecting a life project to act as a guide for our creation.
Firstly, how does a 20-year-old youth from the Democratic Republic of Congo, where the average yearly wage is about $400, come up with some $2,000 or more to pay for the long trek across the African continent into Libya, then onto a makeshift boat that could ferry him to a European port of call? Well, in short, someone gave it to him.
When you talk like this, people think something is more clever than it actually is.
I bet there aren't any living in Whitney in David Cameron's constituency, but it's always the poorest people in this country who have to suffer the effects of migration.
The mere fact that errors are made by people who have the best intentions does not mean that I have to adopt their methods or favour them.
No, it doesn't,
I deplore your techniques and I deplore some of their techniques. What I ask for is not rationalism or reasonableness, but a sense of the variety of human existence and also an attention to the capacities of human beings to absorb each other's differences rather than an encouragement and an exhortation to excite the sense of difference and to deplore it.
There should be no question.
We, the Muslim women, observe parda. Its meaning is not to disclose our beauty, natural or artificial, for the men. It is an order from God, and it is described in these words: Farujahunna wala yubdina zinatahunna. In the name of Allah, the gracious, the merciful. And say to the believing women that they restrain their eyes and guard their private parts, and that they disclose not their natural and artificial beauty, except that which is appearance thereof, and that they draw their head coverings over their bosom, and that they disclose not their beauty save to their husband. These are the restrictions from God, so that human being can lead a life of purity.
There's that thing where if you see a girl on road with a hijab, you're going to think she's a good girl, allow her, right? If you see a girl on road with her hair showing or some tight jeans, you automatically think, right, she's on it. Yeah, exactly, so...
We wear dark clothes, trousers, no skirts, no obvious makeup. Red lipstick is out of the question.
When Pakistani families visit each other, the husband opens the front door to ensure that his wife may not encounter a stranger.
There should be no question.
If there were an influx of an equal number of white Anglo-Saxon...
Well, if the population's the same, the population's the same. A problem doesn't arise, does it?
No, I think I'm stating the question clearly, aren't I? I'm saying that isn't it not logical, conceivable, probable that part of your concern is the difference in culture of these people?
Well, of course, if there were no difference, there would be no problem, of course.
If there were...
There should be no question.
Western countries, whether it be France, whether it be other countries, whether it be European countries, however much they hate the Prophet, Allah promises that He will cut them out from all future hope. And we have the example.
Well, Leicester, it's not one man's problem. It's a problem that has come to the nation as a whole. So unless the people unite and they cooperate with one another, we cannot overcome this problem.
There should be no question.
For identifying a danger of which they were conscious but couldn't believe that nobody would see it.
So the people of Leicester are now beginning to understand that it is no use taking the hostile attitude. So they are cooperating.
What there was, as I say, was a tremendous explosion of emotion, indeed, that at last something which threatened this country, which people had been watching coming, was recognized, was talked about. That's what happened.
being patriotic, of course, can count for extremism today. Terrorism, too, seems to embrace a lot of activities which were once perfectly lawful.
Now, as for what is the situation of Muslims all over the world, I mean, just look at the situation from Libya, come to Syria, to Iraq, to Afghanistan, to Somalia. I mean, so there is a serious political problem in the Muslim world.
Are you really standing up for the equality of all people, or are you just pushing a damaging political ideology on our students?
Due to their age. Now, no one suggests, for example, that this population from the other side of the sticks are going to be given their fare and Chiron's pennies to return them because they are an inconvenience due to their cultural differences from the young group upon whom they now become a burden.
Painted on the garden shed were the numbers 14, which stands for the 14 words, we must secure the existence of our people in a future for white children.
What we are learning to do is to accommodate old people, or should be doing, although, in fact, in the next 30 years, they will represent perhaps an even greater danger to the structure of our society if we cannot intelligently accommodate these people that we have rescued from this other foreign country, from much further away than Jamaica or from India.
The fact that he is now possibly facing a prison sentence for terrorism is an absolute scandal.
No one from authority challenged him, but a member of the public did and told a teenage steward.
He didn't seem that interested. It was as if he had more important things to deal with.
Nietzsche understood that very often it is our actions which precede a change in our emotions and belief structures. Thus, if one is striving to remake themselves, initially they will need to act in a somewhat fraudulent manner. Or in other words, they will need to act as the person they have not yet become but wish to be.
That unless somebody referred to this, nobody would notice that their own native cities were transformed, that the white population was moving out and a different population was moving in.
I didn't say that.
Well, you think then that it would be noticed, but that it would not merely be tolerated, but would be taken as a desirable or acceptable development.
No, I didn't say that either.
Well, that is what you have to say.
So I'll add a little note of caution, which is it's all too easy to say that a single characteristic, such as skin colour, eclipses and overshadows everything else. It's all too easy to fall for the dangerous identity politics, where individuals are kettled into stereotypical communities for the benefit often of self-appointed spokesmen and leaders.
You're simply putting words which you would find convenient in my mouth. What I said was that I didn't say that there would be no difficulties. Difficulties are in the nature of human coexistence. What I said was that the differences that there would be are not necessarily the differences which would excite fear and horror unless someone stands up and says that fear and horror are an appropriate response.
Yeah, right. All the time that we've got immigrants coming here, I'm afraid I think it just encourages more.
You know, Europeans went all over the world. Europeans took over continents. All right? Do you remember that? Australia, New Zealand, South America, North America. How is it that we can now deny just safety? Those people want to go back when it's safe.
All right. The sort of Britain that we want is a Britain where the Sharia is implemented. The Sharia would entail Muslims and non-Muslims living together as they did from China all the way to Spain. Under the Ottoman Caliphate, the Abbasid, the Umayyad Caliphate, it has happened in the past.
You criticise the countries which do, you criticise the Dutch, for example, but I know the British, when they started doing their colonisation, they tried to help the countries they were in. But you think that we were butting in and taking away your opportunities?
Well, yes, I think so. I'll give an example about the Dutch, that we didn't get a chance to be educated, for example.
That was when the Dutch were there?
Yeah.
You see, we in Nigeria, and our part of Nigeria, northern Nigeria, we often feel that Africa is for Muslims, not for Christians. It's meant for Muslims. And our social life is entirely different from the Western ways. We are totally opposed to it.
But I personally was not. I thought, well, they've suffered the same in my childlike manner, and I thought I'd like them. but I happened to meet a German who was charming enough, but through one action made me dislike him. And through the fact that I disliked the one German, it made me think, well, all Germans must be as bad as other people are saying. And therefore, I got a prejudice from meeting somebody. I don't think personal contact is always the way of solving prejudices. And also, you were saying that colonialism...
Europeans took over continents, all right? Do you remember that? Australia, New Zealand, South America, North America. How is it...
Perhaps you'd like to speak a little bit more about that, because I'd like you to.
Well, I'm sure many enlightened people, even in the British Empire, are beginning to realize that your policy of colonialism is not entirely
But
justified.
what is our policy? What would you say our policy was?
Was?
No,
of
is.
exploiting. Is, but now you're retreating. There's nothing else you can do but retreat.
Because they can't get job in that country. And they get better job and better, you see, money in this country. That's why they are coming. And I can, you see, I can sure to say this one, that whenever our country needs us, we can go back, you see.
After all, you must move with the spirit of the times. As it is, you have been sticking on to old outposts, but I'm afraid that the times are against you and you have to shift back. Your policy was, at one time, to get hold of certain colonies in the far-flung outposts and say the sun never sets over the British Empire, and make full use of these colonies.
If the world were to be united, even under 5 great religions, I think there'd be a sterility of thought and a conformity of thought which would be very destroying. The thing which has made the church more liberal and more enlightened, I think all through history, especially in the 18th century, was the attack of the enlightened philosophers who were atheists.
They're having their problems here too, and I see that, Chris, you're in such a snit, you know, about Maggie, and I suppose we can expect you to be even more brattish than usual this evening. Anyway.
Do I know you?
You
seem to know me.
Well, what I really did want to ask a question. You know,
As the IMF has said this, work harder than anybody else.
All right, what are you
George
saying?
Soros.
All right,
but I think I've got an idea, a policy idea.
And be prejudiced in favor of these colonies as long as they were prejudiced in favor of you. That was your policy in the past. Of course, now you cannot, I don't think, hold that same
no,
position.
I would like to disagree upon that, because in the past it was a matter of trade, and we were often going to underdeveloped areas, and we were giving them a lot of help.
Oh, yes.
Now, if you're going to say colonialism is so bad, why should Malta in 1814 wish to come under the British protection? Why should the Fiji Islands in 1874 or Sarawak as late as 1946 wish to come under the British protection? And then again, to go on to the Berlin Conference of European Nations, which I think was in 1884 and 1885, when we had this conference of European nations who were interested in Africa.
There is just some people, you see, those are not changed. Still, they are thinking that they are living in Pakistan. They never think that they are living in Bradford. They think that this country is their own, you see.
And there Britain put forward the unique idea at that time that perhaps the African nations could be brought to a democratic way of life like the USA had, because you were once our colonies,
Yes.
America and Canada and Australia, and like the Western civilized Asian countries like India, Burma and Ceylon. There Britain put forward this idea, and it has been proved that our policy was right, because you now have on March the 6th, the Gold Coast going to have her independence. In another 12 months, you have Malaya going to have her independence. And you have these countries which have been colonies, and which is even more amazing, remaining friendly towards us. Because I would say that India was friendly towards Britain.
I should say so, and that is a credit which lies entirely with us and not with you.
All right? Do you remember that? Australia, New Zealand, South America, North America.
And in the second place, I should also say that your policy of saying that all these countries wished for it, it was you who was putting the wish in their mouths. There was not much they could do. So what is Sarawak, by the way? Who are the responsible people in Sarawak? It's a rainforest. And anyway, the British come there and say, after all, Sarawak wants nothing. The rainforest never speaks anyway. And then you get your, you give them a democratic way of life in due course of time. You are not giving those people a democratic way of life because you feel they ought to give it. This is just a camouflage retreat from a position you know is no longer tenable.
Australia, New Zealand, South America, North America.
From Libya, you come to Syria, to Iraq to Afghanistan to Somalia. I mean,
from China all the way to Spain, under the Ottoman Caliphate, the Abbasid, the Umayyad Caliphate, it has happened in the past.
So there is a serious political problem in the Muslim world.
The sort of Britain that we want is a Britain where the Sharia is implemented.
How is it that we can now deny just safety?
Today, our heartbreak turns to anger. We entrusted the safety of our loved ones into organisations and agencies who had a duty of care to protect them. This inquiry has rightly found that we were failed on every level.
It's all good and well having opinions saying no one listens, but if you're not there to be listened to, who's going to listen?
Time after time I warned them of the dangers ahead.
Today it's on the estates. We've never heard the word racialism.